I want to thank everybody for coming to the Vaad, and I want to give a special Yisher Koyach to Reb Yitzchak Gross, who is serving very capably as our coordinator, Baruch Hashem, and a special Yisher Koyach this time because he set up a special email account. So those of you who don't know Reb Yitzchak or who are watching on the video and would like to submit a topic for us to discuss at a future Vaad, we have a question that you'd like me to address at a future Vaad, you can now get in touch with Reb Yitzchak at an email address that he's set up. You don't need a pen, it's very easy to remember. It's Chinuch Vaad 123. It's as easy to remember as 123. Chinuch Vaad with 2 A's at gmail.com. And also, if you'd like Reb Yitzchak to get in touch with you in case of an emergency, for some reason, I don't expect inclement weather, but we did have a snowstorm once in April. And the next Vaad will be Me'et Hashem April 10th on Sunday night, 4 weeks from tonight. But in case of any emergency, if you give your email address to Reb Yitzchak, then he will be able to notify you in case of an emergency. He'll keep a list of that. Now, as I promised last time, I'm going to go back to the list of questions that was submitted previously. And the topic that we're going to discuss tonight is a question that was submitted: how to have an interesting and inspirational Shabbos table. A very important topic. Now, some people might say, well, listen, if my Shabbos table is not interesting and inspirational, so the kids are smaller, what's the difference? They're not at the table, they don't participate, what's the problem? So, in case anyone was thinking that, the Torah tells us in Parshas Yisro, Ki sheshes yomim Oso Hashem, Seshamayim Ves Oretz. I'm sorry, the wrong pasuk. V'yom hashvi Shabbos la Hashem Elokecha, lo sasa kol malocha atav bin chavitecha abtecha v'mascha v'mtecha v'gercha shebesharecha. Now, who's the benchu bin bisecha v'techa? So you might think maybe it's the adult children. So Rashi brings the Gemara. It actually quotes the Mechilta, but it's discussed in the Gemara Shabbos Kuf Chof Aleph Amud Aleph. Elu HaKatanim, but you might think, Oenu Ela Gedolim. Amata Rei Kvar Muzharim Heim. Already mentioned about Gedolim keeping Shabbos. Elo Ba, this pasuk comes, Ela Lahazir Gedolim Al Shvisas Katanim. That the parents, the adults, are warned that they're responsible for the Shabbos observation, keeping the Shabbos of Katanim. Which means that the Shabbos table is a very important chelik of Shabbos, and the Katanim have to be there also. Now, sometimes it's hard to make it interesting and inspiring. You have children of all different ages. How do you go about getting everyone to participate, to enjoy it, to get a geschmack and inspiration from the Shabbos table? That's our topic for this evening. So when I think of trying to conduct an interesting and inspiring Shabbos table, I'm reminded of an incident that took place almost 30 years ago. My family and I, Baruch Hashem, are zochet to enjoy a very close relationship with an Adam Gadol in Eretz Yisrael who's not so well known in America, but he's very well known in Eretz Yisrael, Reb Nachum Cohen. I see some heads nodding, so you're familiar with Reb Nachum. Maybe you read my book that just came out. My most recent book is a collection of true stories that took place regarding Reb Nachum. It's called 180 Rehov Yafo, if I can plug my own book. Menucha Press came out recently. It's on sale in all these farm stores. In any event, we were zoch about 30 years ago, the first time to participate in a Shabbos Suda at Reb Nachum's house. Now, Reb Nachum is a charismatic individual who's got a tremendous simcha sachayim, and it's contagious. He's a very inspiring person. He has 19 children, and when we were there, not all 19 children were present, but there was over a dozen children at the table. Besides the sort of guests, it was a huge table, and it conducted like a tish, a Rebbe's tish. It lasted for many hours, and I was amazed that throughout this whole Suda, this long, very inspiring Suda, I noticed none of his children moved except to serve and to clear off the dishes. And he had young children at the table also, at least a dozen of them. The older ones who were married were not at the home at that time. And I remember turning to Reb Nachum when we were at the Suda, and after the Suda, I said to Reb Nachum, I have a wonderful eitzah for you. The next time you come to America, you can make a lot of money. He said, really, how? I said, you could sell the glue that you use to keep your kids sitting in their places. So he laughed. He said, I don't use any glue. He said, they sit there because they want to. And the truth is, he's a very charismatic, inspiring person. His Shabbos table was filled with drushes and zmiris and stories. It was inspiring for me to participate in such a suda. Now, not all of us are Reb Nachum Cohen, and not all of us are charismatic, and yet we still have the obligation in a Torah to inspire our children around the Shabbos table. So how do you do it? What's the technique to keep children of all ages glued, without the special glue that Reb Nachum used, to keep his kids in their places? I think very simply, the eitzah is that stories have a tremendous impact on children and adults. Inspiring stories of Gedolim, Tzaddikim, Chazal are exciting. Children can learn a lot from it. People at all ages can appreciate it. I remember we used to tell stories around the table when my children were smaller, and we used to go around the table and ask everyone what they learned from the story. And we had one guest at the table, and it was their turn to speak. They were silent, and we were waiting. And after a brief pause, the person said, what I learned from the story is, next time you come to the Wikler's house, you better pay attention during the story. They're going to ask you what you learned from it. And my mind was wandering, and I don't remember the story. That was the lesson they learned. But it's a good idea to tell stories. Now, what happens if you say, well, look, I tried that. That sounds like a good idea, but I don't know. I tell stories at the table. My kids are not interested. People are bored. It's not exciting, and they want me to get over with it already, and it doesn't seem to work. I tried. I've read books of stories, and I try to tell them over. I'm not such a great storyteller. What can I tell you? That's not my strength, and my kids are not interested, and they're not engaged in the Shabbos table, and I feel bad about it. So what can I do then? So I want to tell you a story, a true story, about a family that I worked with a number of years ago. And this was actually a Kollel couple that I saw many years ago. They originally came because they had problems with their marriage. Now, as I recall, the younger man at the time was somebody who had a very difficult time understanding other people's feelings. And he certainly didn't seem to understand his wife's feelings very well. And she was very frustrated about that. And she had a problem with maybe modulating her emotions and controlling some of her feelings. And she could lose her temper at times and fly off the handle a little bit. And they certainly needed marriage counseling. And when they came, I started working with them. And after a few weeks, the husband said he could see that the marriage counseling was important. He could even see that it would be helpful. But he felt for him and his wife it was going to take too long to solve their problems. And he simply felt he couldn't afford it. They dropped out. And I didn't hear from them for a few years. And then, maybe 10 years later, I get a call from a colleague of mine. And he said, do you remember this couple? Well, I said, I'm not allowed to say whether I remember them or not. Why are you calling? He said, well, he's working with the wife. Been seeing her for a couple of years. And she's having a difficult time coping with the stress at home. It's a lot of stress. Their marriage is not any better than when you saw them, he said to me. And they really need a lot of help. The husband doesn't want to come for marriage counseling. And I'm just basically barely keeping her together, so to speak. And I'm afraid she's going to break down. I said, why are you calling me? He said, well, I know it's unconventional, but I think with this family, you're just going to have to think out of the box. I said, so what do you want from me? He said, one of the things that's most stressful for this couple, for this woman, is that they have absolutely, literally no Shabbos table. It's not that people are not engaged or involved. There's nobody there. The kids don't stay at the table. There's no Shabbos table. And for this woman, that's like the last straw. She puts in so much effort to try to pull things together in the family, and with no Shabbos table, I'd like you to see the couple. I said, well, the husband refused to see me, didn't want to come back. No, he had a good kesher with you, just that he felt he couldn't afford to continue the marriage counseling. But he liked you, as a matter of fact. And he'd be willing to see you again. I'd like to recommend that you see this couple just to teach them how to run a Shabbos table. I said, that's not what therapy is about. That's not how therapy works. He said, no, we've got to think out of the box. I want to save this woman, and I want to save her marriage, and I think this would do it. Just a few sessions with you to try to help the two of them work out a better Shabbos table. Do it as a favor for me. I think it would help them tremendously. He's a close colleague of mine. I do try to think out of the box sometimes. I said, okay. Well, I didn't know what I was in for. I met with the couple, and I saw that it was more challenging than I thought. They had, I think, about 4 children at home at the time. This was 10 years after I had seen them originally. They had one child that was older, young man who was pretty much off the derech. He was still living at home, and he would come sometimes to the Shabbos table and ask questions just lakanter, and constantly knocking anything about Yiddishkeit. The father would try to explain why we do this, why that's important, and the son would just knock, knock, knock. Then they had one child that had a job. She was working. Actually, it was a fairly good job. She was earning a nice salary, but she had some social problems of her own. A bit of a recluse, didn't really have many friends, stayed in her room most of the time when she was home, worked late hours, and Shabbos, she would just take her own food and eat it in her room. Then there was 2 other children who basically did the same thing. They would help themselves to the food, and even the husband and wife didn't eat together on Shabbos. I said, how do you not eat together on Shabbos? The 2 of you, what happens? Well, the husband used to spend time in shul after davening, learning whatever seder he had before he would come home. The wife would make kiddush for herself and eat by herself. She was done by the time the husband came home. So she had eaten, the husband would eat by himself, the kids would help themselves whatever they wanted from the refrigerator, from the hot plate, and nobody ate together. I said, this is very bizarre. It doesn't bother you? Of course it bothered. It bothered both of them. They'd love to have a normal Shabbos table. I said, well, can the 2 of you get together? Well, he could come home earlier. She would wait for him. Fine. What about the kids? The kids don't come. I said, what have you tried? Well, we tried telling stories. You know, that's what they always say, tell stories, but no one was interested. And he tried Divrei Torah, no one was interested. And no conversation. So here was a family of 6 people living at home, and no one was eating together on Shabbos. Both suitors, no one eat together. I didn't realize what a challenge I was in for. So I said, well, tell me, do you eat in a room where there's a door that you could close, where you could limit whether they come in or come out? They said, no, our dining room is open. It's open to the kitchen. There's no door. They come in, they take what they want, they eat. One son who eats at the table with his parents, but as soon as he's finished eating, he gets up and leaves. And then he comes back to benching, or he benches and goes back to his room. I said, this is really bizarre. No one is eating together. No one is coming together in any conversation. It must be stressful for both of you. And they said it was. They said they really wanted to have some kind of a Shabbos table where the people would be together, where the children would stay. I said, okay, so here's the plan. Is there a room in the house that you could eat in, where you have a door that you could close and not let anybody in if you wanted to, or keep them in, or control who comes in and goes out? They thought for a minute, and I said, well, the only room we have like that is the bedroom. She said, but we could eat in the bedroom if you wanted us to. I said, yeah, that's what I'd like you to do. She said, okay, we have a folding table. I'll set up in the bedroom. That's fine. I said, what's the purpose of that? I said, I want you to be able to control when they come in and when they leave the Shabbos table. And the only way you can do that, if you can have a door that you can lock when you get in, and they have to knock to get in. So, well, they're not going to want to come in. And even if we ate in the bedroom, they can help themselves to the food in the refrigerator anyway. How does that help? I said, because you're going to create an atmosphere around the Shabbos table that they're going to want to be there. Well, how are we going to do that? We tried everything. I said, well, I'll tell you what you're going to do. I said, kids love stories. And we tried. I know you tried telling stories. And I know the way this husband told the stories. It was probably like a Pilpul Shir or a Musa Shmooze. And anyone would be bored to hear a story like that. I said, I want you to tell stories to your children about yourselves. If it's one thing children love to hear stories, but they love 10 times more to hear stories about their parents. And to hear stories about the parents, when the parents were children, is la'ela ula'ela. What kind of stories? Nothing special. It doesn't matter what it was. As long as it happened, it really happened, to either one of you, your kids are going to be fascinated, and they're going to want to hear those stories. Kids always want to hear stories about their parents when they were younger. I said, you have 2 Shabbos Sudas. Shalosh Sudas you could eat at home. You can eat in shul. 2 Shabbos Sudas at home. One of you will tell the story Friday night, and one of you will tell the story Shabbos lunch. You will tell your children in advance that there's going to be a story at the Shabbos table. But only those who are in the bedroom, b'shas kiddush, will get to hear the story. Kids are not going to want to come in. It's not going to matter to them. You have one kid who will be there. He'll let the others know what they missed. Trust me. Well, kachava. They announced to the children they're going to be telling stories about themselves at the Shabbos table. They thought it was a joke. They weren't serious. It's a trick. It's a game. It's some psychological technique to get them to come to the table. They don't want to come to the table. They're not interested in that. The youngest one, who was more pliable, more passive, more workable, he was going to eat there anyway, so he was there for Kiddush anyway. After Kiddush, they were washing, and there was a knock on the door. One of the children wanted to come in. He's sorry he missed Kiddush. He'll make his own Kiddush, but he wants to be there for the story. Okay, they let him in. They weren't sure if they were allowed to. What did Dr. Wikler say? They're going to break the rules. I don't know. Not following the system. Okay. They let him in. They locked the door. No one else knocked. No one else tried to come in. The 2 were at the table. Well, let's get to the story. Well, the story I told them has to be after the soup, not right away. It has to be something, the main dish is never served until after they give out the awards at the dinner. Same idea here. They want the story. They have to sit through the first 2 courses. So they sat through the first 2 courses. They told the story. And they had to think and think until they come up with a story from their childhood. It was difficult for both of them. It was more difficult for the husband than the wife. What's the story? What happened? Doesn't matter what it is, I said. It's just something that happened to you. It could be something that was fun. It could be something that was exciting. It could be hashgacha pratis. It could be an embarrassing story. It doesn't matter. It's just that it's about you when you were a kid. Anything that you can remember. And the younger you are, the better. And as long as it's true and don't exaggerate or amplify it in any way. Just tell the story as it was. They did it the second week. By, I think it was the 3rd week maybe, or the 4th week, they had all 4 kids at the table. They wanted to hear the story, and then they argued and discussed the story, and back and forth. And the one who was Lakanta was arguing with the story, but back and forth. Shakal Vataria, okay, they were there. And in the space of a few short weeks, Baruch Hashem, we were able to get out of the bedroom, all 4 kids at the table for the bulk of the Shabbos Suda. Now, clearly this was a multi-problem family, and the problems were not solved with this, but I'm just citing this as an example. With such a family, where each one of the children was at risk in a different way, some in Yiddishkeit and some in academically and socially, certainly a multi-problem family. If this could work for this family, then it can work for you. So my eitzah to have a more inspiring and interesting Shabbos table is to tell your children stories. And if your children don't like stories and they're bored and you tried it and you gave up on it, then use the eitzah that I gave you tonight. Tell a personal story, something from your own life, your own experience, and you'll see how enthused your children are going to be to learn about what Tati, what Mommy was like when they were younger, when they were your age. It's going to be the kind of glue that's going to keep your children in their seats. And I'm not saying children have to sit at the table for the whole meal, and younger children need to go away sometimes and play and come back. But to make it interesting, to make them want to be there, to make them inspired by the Shabbos table, if they know every week there's going to be a story. Now, it doesn't come to you right away. You're going to have to do your homework. You have to prepare. You have to think about it. And you don't have to worry that it's a story that has to have a gewaltige Mussar Haskel. It's just a story about you, a story about your spouse, either one of you. You can take turns. It's going to be so interesting and exciting for your children that they're going to want to be there. They're going to look forward to it. You can discuss it, and it can make your Shabbos table very inspiring and inspirational. We remind you again that the next Vaad will take place, B'ezras Hashem, Sunday night, 4 weeks from tonight, April 10th. And again, if you want to make a suggestion for a topic for us to discuss at the Vaad, or you want to put your name on the email list, it's chinuchvaad123@gmail.com. Thank you.